Scenes and Adventures in the Semi-Alpine region of the Ozark Mountains of Missouri and Arkansas, 1853, by Henry Rowe, Schoolcraft. Chapter 4, Part 1, Number 10. November 10th. While we laid on our pallets last night, the trampling of hooves was frequently heard. But at length the practiced ear of the hunter detected that these were the sounds of wild animals' hooves, and not of our horses. This man's eye had shown an unwonted degree of restlessness and uneasiness during the afternoon of the preceding day, while witnessing the abundant signs of deer and elk in the country. But this excited no suspicions. He was restless during the night, and was disturbed at a very early hour, long before light, by this trampling of animals. These sounds, he said to me, did not proceed from the horses, which were hobbled. He got up and found both animals missing. Butcher's memory of corn and corn fodder had his old masters at Potosi had not yet deserted him, and he carried the hunter's horse along with him. I immediately jumped up and accompanied him in their pursuit. There was some moonlight, with clouds rapidly passing. We pursued our back track, anxiously looking from every eminence and stopping to listen for the sound of the bells. Roberts occasionally took up a handful of leaves, which were thickly strewn around, and held them up in the moonlight to see whether the corks of the horses' shoes had not penetrated them. When he finally found this sign, he was sure we were in the right way. At length, when we had gone several miles, and reached an eminence that overlooked the broad plain of the Valley of Leaves, we plainly descried the fugitives jumping on as fast as possible on the way back. We soon overhauled them and brought them to camp by daybreak, before my companion had yet awaked. Roberts now sallied out, and in a few minutes fired at and killed a fat doe, which he brought in, and we made a breakfast by roasting steaks. Roberts had expressed no dissatisfaction or desire to return, but sallying out again among the deer on horseback, said he would rejoin us presently at a future point. We traveled on, expecting at every turn to see him reappear, but we saw no more of him. The rascal had not only deserted us at a difficult point, but he carried off my best new hunting knife, a loss not to be repaired in such a place. We at length came to a point where the trail forked. This put us to a stand. Which to take, we knew not, and the result was of immense consequence to our journey, as we afterwards found, for had we taken the right-hand fork, we should have been conducted in a more direct line to the portion of the country we sought to explore. We took the left-hand fork, which we followed diligently, crossing several streams running to the northwest, which were probably tributary to the Missouri through the Gasconade. It was after dark before we came to a spot having the requisites for an encampment, particularly water. It was an opening on the margin of a small lake, having an outlet southeast, which we finally determined to be either one of the sources of the Black River or of the river currents. We had now traveled about 20 miles from our last camp in a southerly direction. We did not entirely relinquish the idea of being rejoined by Roberts, nor become fully satisfied of his treachery, till late in the evening. We had relied on his guidance till we should be able to reach some hunter's camp on the White or Arkansas rivers, but this idea was henceforth abandoned. Left thus, on the commencement of our journey in the wilderness, without a guide or hunter, we were consigned to a doubtful fate, our extrication from which depended wholly upon a decision and self-reliance, which he only knows how to value who is first called to grapple with the hardships of Western life. It was the edge of a prairie where we had halted. Wood was rather scarce. But we made shift to build a good fire and went to sleep with no object near us to excite sympathy but our horse, who was securely bailed and tethered. When we awoke in the morning, the fire was out and a pack of wolves were howling within a few hundred yards of our camp. Whether the horse feared them, I know not, but he had taken his position near the embers of the fire, where he stood quite still. November 11th. In passing 2 miles, we crossed a small stream running southeast, which evidently had its source in the little lake at our last night's encampment. The trail beyond this was often faint. In a course of 8 or 10 miles, we began to ascend elevations covered with pines, but of so sterile and hard a soil that we lost all trace of it. We wound about among these desolate pine ridges a mile or two, till from one of the high points we descried a river in a deep valley having a dense forest of hardwood and every indication of animal life. Overjoyed at this, we mended our pace and, by dint of great caution, led our pack horse into it. It proved to be the river Currents, a fine stream with fertile banks and clear, sparkling waters. The gray squirrel was seen sporting on its shady margin, and as night approached, the wild turkey came in from the plains to drink and make its nightly abode. After fording the river, we soon found our lost trail, which we followed a while up the stream, then across a high ridge which constituted its southern bank, and through dense thickets to the summits of a narrow, deep and dark limestone valley, which appeared to be an abyss. Daylight left us as we wound down a gorge into its dreary precincts, and we no sooner found it traversed by a clear brook than we determined to encamp. As the fire flashed up, it revealed on either side steep and frowning cliffs which might gratify the wildest spirit of romance. This stream, with its embedded cavernous cliffs, I designated the Wall Cave, or Ononda Valley. We had advanced this day about 18 or 20 miles. We had an opportunity, while on the skirts of the high prairie lands, to fire some elk and to observe their stately motions. But being still supplied with venison, we were not willing to waste the time in pursuing them. Our course varied from south to southwest. November 12th. Daylight fully revealed our position. We were in a valley, often not more than 600 feet wide, with walls of high precipitous limestone rock. These cliffs were remarkable for nothing so much as their caverns, seated uniformly at a height of 40 or 50 feet above the ground in inaccessible positions. I do not know the number of these caves, as we did not count them, but they existed on either side of the valley as far as we explored it. Most of them were too high to reach. A tree had fallen against the cliff near one of them, by climbing which I reached a small ledge of the rock that afforded a little footing, and by cautiously groping along, the orifice was finally reached and entered. It proved interesting, although of no great extent, but it contained stalactites depending in clusters from the walls. Of these I secured a number which were translucent. Slender crystals of nitrate of potash, of perfect whiteness and crystalline beauty, were found in some of the crevices. Having secured specimens of these, I again got out on the ledge of rock and, reaching the tree, descended in safety. About half a mile higher up the valley on its south side, we discovered a cavern of gigantic dimensions. The opening in the face of the rock appeared to be about 80 or 90 feet wide and about 30 high. A projection of rock on one side enabled us to enter it. A vast and gloomy rotundo opened before us. It, very soon after the entry, increases in height into 60 or 70 feet, and in width to 150 or 200 feet, forming an immense hall. This hall has another opening or corridor leading to a precipitous part of the cliff. It extends into the rocks southerly, an unexplored distance branching off in lateral avenues from the main trunk. We explored the main gallery 500 or 600 yards when we found obstructions. The roof has been blackened by the carbonaceous effect of fires, kindled by Indians or white men who have visited it in former years in search of nitrous earth. In some parts of it, compact bodies of pebbles and reddish clay, very similar to that found on the cliffs, are seen, which creates an idea that the cabin must have been an open orifice at the geological era of the diluvial deposits. This earth, by being lixiviated with common house ashes, produces a liquid which on evaporation yields saltpeter. The cave, I was informed at Potosi, has been visited for this purpose by Colonel Ashley, and it appropriately bears his name. Finding it a perfect rock house, and being dry and affording advantages for some necessary repairs to our gear, and arrangements for the further continuation of our explorations, we, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, removed our camp up the valley and encamped within it. We could shelter ourselves completely in its capacious chambers in case of rain, of which there were indications, and take a calm view of the course it seemed now expedient to pursue. Thus far we had had a trail, however slight, to follow, but from this point there was none. We were to plunge into the pathless woods and to trust ourselves alone to the compass and the best judgment we could form of courses, distances, and probabilities. A wilderness lay before us, behind us, and around us. We had taken our lives in our hands, and we were well satisfied that our success must depend on our vigilance, energy, and determination. In addition to the exertion of providing food and repairing our clothing, which as we urged our way was paying tribute to every sharp bush we pressed through, we had to exercise a constant vigilance to prevent Indian surprises, for experience had already taught us that in the wilderness, where there is no law to impose restraint but the moral law of the heart, man is the greatest enemy of man.